KTV, your official source for government information.
Youth Asset Development. If you haven't heard about it already, you will. It's a set of techniques designed to make kids strong and resilient. Supporters say it's one of the most powerful ways to help kids become healthy, caring, and responsible. At a time when people feel overwhelmed by the challenges facing children and adolescents, communities across the country are working together on a positive vision for young people. Instead of focusing only on reducing risks and intervening in problems, these communities are rallying to build a foundation that all young people need. The Asset Development Framework identifies 40 critical factors for young people's personal growth. When drawn together, the assets offer a set of benchmarks for kids as they develop. The asset approach comes from the Minneapolis-based Search Institute. It's been tested on over 1 million kids. It provides a set of benchmarks for positive child and adolescent development, and it points out the important roles that families, schools, congregations, neighborhoods, and others play in shaping young people's lives. What is asset development? How is it used? And why is this set of techniques something that people in Howard County should pay attention to? Hi, I'm Rich Krieg, host of On the Horizon, and with me in the studio today are Peter Benson, president of the Search Institute, Peggy Alexander, Horizon Foundation, and Barbara Hoffman, the principal of the Burley Manor Middle School. Welcome to On the Horizon.
Okay.
Peter, let me start with you. What is asset development?
Well, developmental assets are building blocks of positive development that every young person needs. Absolutely every young person needs them. And they need to find them all over their community, in neighborhoods, families, schools, congregations, playgrounds. Building blocks of support, boundary setting, high expectations, structured time use, encouragement around skill building and social competency building. And they're scientifically known building blocks that matter for every young person. So asset development is the process of trying to create or recreate communities, which in fact will be sure to build assets in young people's lives all day long for every young person. It's positive development. It's about the building blocks that promote healthy development. And we know from a great deal of research that as communities grab their asset building power, really wonderful things happen to the outcomes of young people.
Give us an idea of scale, because you're talking about communities.
Yes.
Has this approach been used in how many communities? How many kids have been touched by it, to your knowledge?
Yes, over 500 towns and cities in the United States have launched these community-wide asset building initiatives. It's a great question about how many young people have been touched. I don't think we've actually counted those, but some of these are big cities like Seattle, Albuquerque, New Mexico, Orlando. New York City is actually beginning the process of trying to mobilize citizens around asset building. So I'm sure we're talking about several million young people a year now have interventions in their lives or experiences in their lives that are because communities are mobilizing around this framework of developmental assets. Another piece of this, Rich, is I think we just recently counted that last year, in the year 2002, we trained 100,000 adults in the United States to become asset champions in their places of work and in their own lives. And it's hard to count and track the ripple effects that has. But if we can keep up this momentum of 100,000 to 200,000 citizens a year, you do finally get to some critical mass that could be a tipping point. And it's hard to be scientific about exactly when that moment or that percentage occurs. But this work is spreading like wildfire. And it is wonderful to have an opportunity to be here to launch this conversation.
Okay, well, thank you for that, Peter. And one of the places where it's spread to is Howard County. And Peggy, tell us a little bit about what Horizon Foundation is doing around this asset development model.
We, for the last year, have been focusing in the schools, and in addition, we're preparing to launch a countywide initiative. We've been working in 3 schools, 1 high school, 1 middle school, 1 elementary school, working very hard and in a very excited way as to how we can build assets in kids in the classroom through the positive school climate, working with the staff so that they understand that, and with parents as well. So we're very pleased at the end of our first year, and we are now in the planning stages of taking this countywide so that organizations, nonprofits, additional schools will also be on the line of working with assets.
And recap for the audience, how did you come to asset development? Where did it start? When did it come in, and how?
We were working in the general field of character education and staff wellness in a number of schools here in the school system. And we found that we wanted to focus more directly and be more specific in what we were doing with children. We also wanted to work with something that was research-based and that could also be applied to the community as well. So we chose 3 schools who were very interested in wanting to step forward and promote this.
Okay, and great segue to you, Barbara. You're one of the schools. Before you respond or talk about the asset development model in Burley Manor, tell us a little bit about the school.
Okay, it's a middle school, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. We have a fairly active parent group. When we went outdoor ed last year with the 6th grade, we had 150 students and 64 adults. So we do have a lot of parent participation. We have 24 to 25% Asian American population, small ESOL, and some great kids. And the school is now going to be in its 12th year, so many of the staff has been there a while. They opened the school, and about half the staff are new teachers in the last few years. We have been redistricted this year, so we think that we're going to have a real challenge on our hand. We're going to get 120 new students from some different schools, and so we're going to have to start our asset building all over again. And a lot of our summer student training has been surrounding what are we going to do with the new kids when they come.
Yeah, well, the audience knows that our schools really are overburdened, the demands placed on teachers. How is it in that context that you decided to go ahead and do this type of a program within Burley Manor?
Well, I read about it. Peggy brought it to our attention, and it fits right in with a lot of the things that middle schools do in general. We have an advisory program which meets on a daily basis. 1 caring adult and a consistent group of students meet every day for a short period of time. The teacher becomes their advocate. It's also a forum for for kids to talk about things, to build up their affective domain as well as their academics. It fit in with some of the holistic learning that the county was doing. It also fit in with something that I like very much, Cooperative Discipline, written by Linda Albert, and she promotes positive discipline approaches. So it really kind of fit in, and what Peggy and I talk all the time, what it does is it forces us to intentionally focus on some of the good things that we do all the time, but we don't do them all the time because we forget to focus on them. So this is allowing us to be very intentional about what we do. And it just seemed to fit right in with making Burley Manor a safe, comfortable place for students to learn. And the Horizon Foundation allowed us and helped us focus on doing it this year.
And as you were talking just now, I heard a number of the 40 asset safety and the environment and so on, and I'm struck by the power of this approach, Peter. When you talk about the development of kids, people think of the stages of infants, toddlers, preschoolers, all the way up. Do the assets align with those developmental stages? How would you describe how they fit together?
And well, absolutely, they do align. And what changes with age is how one might actually express or promote a particular developmental asset. So within the developmental assets...
Could you give us an example of that?
Sure. A caring family. how a family expresses its care, love, support, and affirmation of an infant is different than how you might do it for a 16-year-old. But the asset stays the same. It's about that deep sense of care and an adult being deeply present in a young person's life and putting that young person number one. Well, again, how that's actually expressed for a young child would be quite a bit different. Even though I think when people hear this, they say, I could figure that out. I understand that caring family looks a little bit different in its discipline side, in how it gives support when children are 3 as opposed to when they're 15 or 16. So the assets have been calibrated so that they can be explained to people whose touch with kids happens to be in different age groups. We love to stand up in our work around trying to create communities from ages 0 to at least 20 that are more seamless around the way they embrace our young people. This is a society that gets so siloed and turfed. And so you've got all these people who are working in early childhood, middle childhood, and junior high, high school. Those oftentimes are very disconnected segments of work and of schools and of every agency in town. And so we think it's very important for communities to rebuild a vision of how it does become an asset-building city for all of its young people every day, all the way from birth to age 20.
And that sounds like it'd be a pretty formidable thing to do, that take a lot of energy, a lot of
Yes.
time, creativity. Does one have to be a specialist, Peggy, to do asset development with kids, with children and adolescents?
That's the beauty of assets. It's really for everyone. It's for parents, it's for school teachers, it's for the bus drivers, it's for people who work in organizations that serve youth. It's really all of us. It's a neighbor paying attention, more attention to a child. It's anywhere from very simple acts to policy changes and to having youth be on boards and recognizing youth in that way. So there's a whole continuum of involvement one can be involved in.
So the basic process then, recognizing that it could vary from place to place, is to take a young person where he or she is and to in effect work together, or to have happen that the assets will grow. What can you say about the typical quote-unquote young person? Is it possible to say the number of assets that they would have? And talk a little
Sure.
bit about that, Peter.
In the taxonomy of developmental assets are 40 specific building blocks, and those 40 in turn are divided into some categories to make them more memorable to people. So 6 of them are about ways of expressing support by communities to young people: intergenerational relationships, caring family, warm school, caring neighborhood. Those would all be forms of support. Then there's another set around boundaries and expectations, and hopefully more of a harmony of voice in communities around what is in bounds and out of bounds, so that young people hear more consistent message than they do now. Then there's a set about structured time use. There's a set around empowerment and the engagement of young people with adults in the work of building community and of serving and of healing. Then there are assets around lifelong educational commitment, positive human values like equality and justice and caring and honesty, a set of social competency assets, and then 4 of the assets are about positive identity, feeling good about one's future, that the future is worth getting to, feeling that one has a certain amount of power in one's life to actually make change. 40 building blocks. We collect data in hundreds of cities a year to help cities develop a portrait of how well are we developing these 40 building blocks in the lives of our young. And it's a very deep survey process. 250,000 young people a year, several million studied through this lens in the last 5 years alone. When we aggregate across hundreds and hundreds of American communities, from Seattle to Orlando and lots of small towns in between, we discover some things. The average number of assets is about 19, when in fact, the research suggests it sure would be great if young people experienced the vast majority of these building blocks, 30 or more of them. Life gets so much richer as these assets build in a life. They're so formative in one's developmental trajectory and their outcomes. So the average is about 19. About 60% of all of the young people in America's middle school and high schools, 60% experience 20 or fewer of the assets. Only about 9% experience 30 or more of these developmental building blocks. And if you care about academic achievement, if you care about a next generation of good parents, of good workers, of civic engagement, all of those important things, they're all rooted in how well we build these developmental strengths. And so it becomes a very important vision for a town, a city, a county, to begin to imagine, how do we move the majority of our young people, the vast majority, to live in an asset-rich environment. And one final word about that. Part of the theory of this important asset building work is to be sure that young people have redundant asset building experiences in all the places they hang out, whether that's a place called family or neighborhood or synagogue, mosque, congregation, public school, private school, playground, YMCA, that all of these places begin to share the vision and ratchet up their natural capacity to be asset building environments. Because asset building, as we have been saying, is largely rooted in relationships and adults slowing down to begin to pay attention to their role in strength building. So it's creating a fabric of consistency in a town, a city, and a county. And it's fabulous that this conversation is here right now about building that web.
Sustaining it. It seems very multifaceted from what Peter's saying, Peggy, and quite a lot of work would seem to happen in little pieces all over a community. And yet you also talk about simple acts. How do you cut into this? How do you start doing this at the community scale?
I think that one of the assumptions of starting such an initiative is that it is youth-led.
And Peter mentioned empowerment as one.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Talk a little bit about that aspect of it, because I think that's important.
That aspect's very important. What we're doing is really turning a culture or a community or a county's attention to working with youth instead of for youth, which is a whole paradigm shift. And so this sense of empowerment is seeing kids as resources, seeing them as valuable, seeing them as participants with us in creating community. So, for instance, at the Horizon Foundation, we have a group of young people who work on grants, so making grants to other youth groups. And so those kids will be a core of this empowerment, of this, they're already feeling an important part of the community, and so we'll build on their skills and their talents, and we'll bring other youth in and provide other opportunities for kids to step forward and be seen. And Burley Manor is such a beautiful example of that, because that's been our theme of this year, student voice.
Talk a little bit about that.
When we did our pre-assessment, the thing that jumped out at us the most needy was that the students felt they didn't have a voice at the school. They didn't feel the school spoke for them, and that what they had to say was being listened to. And so we focused this entire year on giving kids more of a voice in the running of the school. And our most notorious, or I don't know, notorious is the wrong word, example would be that we have had a rockathon at our school for something 9 or 10 years where the kids rock to raise money for the Lung Association. But it has always been run by a teacher. This year we had a student-led committee that coordinated the entire event, and it is a huge event. With the snow, it was postponed 3 times, and we raised this year $8,000 for the Lung Association, which in the last few years we have been the second largest group donator in the state of Maryland. Was it different? It was way different. It was a whole different approach. The kids did everything from the plans to the implementation to the assessment at the end to what are we going to do next year, rather than from the teacher's perspective. We did have 2 children who applied for the group that Peggy had just mentioned to be on the Horizon Grant Foundation Forum, and we had 4 kids apply, and 2 kids made it, and they were so excited about having this voice. They would come to me, well, I'm going to have my interview in 2 days, or, you know, here's my application, what do you think? And do you think they're really going to listen to me? And we had many, many things occur, some very small, and some with, 10 or 15 kids at a time. But we have a lot of student-led events at a middle school, and middle school kids are still pretty young. They can't drive, they can't take themselves anyplace, so a lot of our events occur within the school day, which means they have to arrange their studies and their academics, which are, of course, our first directive, is to have the kids do well in school. And then they still have to be able to fit all these things in. We have our own TV studio, as I was telling you when I first came in. It's run by students. We have a bullying program that we had some students present at this year. They wrote their own presentation. They also presented a forum on developmental assets for other children to attend. We have a school culture committee, as do all the 3 schools, which are teachers, parents, and students who are planning activities with developmental assets, and we have 4 boys this year who decided to be on our school culture committee, and they ran a forum for about 30 or 40 kids in the school so that they could teach them more about developmental assets. What are they? More direct teaching. We have a thing called Common Ground, which is 12 students invited 12 other students from 2 different middle schools, and they get together a few times a year in a forum situation where they discuss things that they have in common. They are schools with a different kind of population than ours, and how can we all get along together? How are we alike and how are we different? That forms their discussion through the year, and then they end up with a celebration that's been rained out the last 3 years, but we have it anyway. We just have it indoors instead of at the park. They plan it. They plan all the activities. They've been meeting already. Part of their initiative this year was to help the new students, and how are we going to do that?
Right. And I'm hearing those assets tick off and all those things you're talking about. And I know, Peter, that your organization cares deeply and takes very seriously this notion of empowering young people. Could you talk a little bit about how within the Search organization and beyond you've harnessed young people in every capacity?
Sure. Well, one of the things that's so exciting about working at Search Institute is so much of the work is actually done by communities, not by us, and they're connected to us by umbilical cords, where they teach us about the making of change, and we teach them what we're learning about the transformation to asset building communities. In nearly all the communities that are part of the asset building movement, they move forward in exciting ways in the engagement of young people in planning the strategies for their asset building initiative, for becoming speakers and forming a speakers bureau of middle school and high school young people who fan out across a town or a city to give the asset message. The engagement of young people in the decision making all throughout the movement. We learn a great deal. We probably learn more about good youth engagement than we teach, partly because the framework so easily encourages the reconnection of generations in support to each other. It really is amazing, some of the creative things that begin to happen. And the young people who learn about this power of being an asset builder, grabbing it when they're 14, calling us when they're 18 to say, where do you go to study this? How do you become an asset builder as an entire life? Where is this work? Who is open to doing this? And so we're starting to see young people nurtured in asset building communities who naturally want this to become who they are, not only in their daily life but in their professional life. One final thing is we host a national conference now. This will be the 7th this coming fall in San Jose, California. And representatives come from many hundreds of the asset building initiatives in the national movement. And about 500 of the 2,000 people will be adolescents. 1,500 adults, 500 adolescents. Someday, maybe in about 4 years, we'll get to half and half. But it so wonderfully changes the tone and tenor of a conference, of a big conference, when you have 500 young people who then help us design the conference. They conduct many of the workshops. They are on the stage constantly. They're not just the audience. They really are deeply engaged in the design and running of this entire 3.5-day party of asset building. And they make it so much richer and so much deeper and more enjoyable than if just 12 of people my age would have figured it out. We don't have a clue anymore about what really makes those things gripping. And our teachers here then, our real teachers, are young people. And it is wonderful to remember that a 15-year-old has something to teach me, and it doesn't always go the other way.
Very important words, and I'm sure that resonates with you, Peggy, and we only have a couple of minutes left. And I'd like to give you the last word. Why don't you tell us where you'd like to be in a year? I know you're putting a lot of energy into this, but where are you going with this? You've heard Peter talk about the national level. Give us your thoughts about right here in Howard County.
Right here in Howard County, we have a lot of potential here in Howard County. We have a community that's proactive and kind of on the edge already, and Columbia was based on great ideals. I can't wait to get to the kids and create opportunities for them, and to have a youth website, and to have kids going out in the community speaking about assets, and having mentor relationships, and having intergenerational connections, and just bringing that aliveness that comes through for the assets. The assets gives us an opportunity to step forward. And I want to see our schools really this year getting it in the classrooms and getting it in the fabric, and having us all really come alive with it. So that's my vision for this year.
Well, on that note, let me thank this panel. Peter, thank you very much for coming in. Peggy Alexander and Barbara Hoffman. And we thank our audience, and see you next time.
We're working to keep our neighborhoods safe. Your county, working for you in ways you never imagined.
GTV, your official source for government information.